Welcome back to another episode of Mad Props. Today, we are joined by comic book artist Andy Smith. He's worked for Marvel, he's worked for DC, he's worked for himself. He's been in the game for over 30 years, so we're really excited to have him on. As you guys know, I'm a big comic book guy. We talk more about his career. We talk a little bit about his upcoming. We talk a lot about movies at the end. You're really going to want to stay for the end. It really gets exciting with the MCU and his opinions on that. It's going to be really good. Before we get started, we have to pay the bills. This podcast is brought to you by Audible. As someone who loves to read, I know it can be hard to find the time to just sit down and turn the pages. Sure, there's that moment like right before bed, or maybe you get like 10 minutes to yourself, but it doesn't always scratch the itch to dive into a good story. The worst part, so much of my day, whether I'm editing these podcasts or other videos or going on a run or even walking the dogs, feels like wasted time where I could be enjoying some of those books I'm trying to go. Well, Audible stepped up to the plate and brought those books to me in those moments. With Audible, you can get your favorite stories anytime, anywhere, whether you're on a run, you're doing some work like I do, maybe you're on a commute to school, to work, going on a trip, you're just in the car. Audible puts thousands of audiobooks right at your fingertips, making it easier than ever to immerse yourself in a great book no matter what you're doing. Start your 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Schnabel Studios. That's audibletrial.com/SCHNABEL Studios to get a 30-day free trial today. Sign up for Audible and bring your favorite stories to life. Reading just got a whole lot easier. audibletrial.com/Schnabel Studios. This podcast is also brought to you by the Curiosity Box. As someone who loves to learn, I'm always asking questions. How do things work? Where do the things come from? What is in the sky above us? What is going on with the planets lining up? They say all the planets are going to line up. Now, only some of the planets are going to line up. What's going on with all that? Well, if you're like me, the Curiosity Box by Vsauce is the perfect way to spark that curiosity. Each Curiosity Box is filled with fascinating activities, mind-bending science experiments, and tools for measuring the world in ways you've never imagined. They actually have this one little piece that you can buy that you can look through it, and if you could see a full kangaroo in it, you are the perfect distance away to escape before it attacks you. I'm serious, that is something that comes in the Curiosity Box. Are you ready to fuel your curiosity? Head over to the-curiosity-box.pxf.io/Schnabel Studios. I know it's a long one. That's the-curiosity-box.pxf.io/Schnabel Studios and grab your Curiosity Box today. Don't wonder what all the fuss is about. Start learning something new. That's the-curiosity-box.pxf.io/Schnabel Studios. Order yours now and let the discoveries begin. Finally, this podcast is brought to you by Schnabel Studios. Schnabel Studios is your go-to for capturing live events or crafting compelling, scripted, or live storytelling moments. Whether you want to relive the excitement of the big game or just share your story through a podcast, Schnabel Studios has you covered. Visit schnabelstudios.com today to offer everything, or to explore everything that Schnabel Studios has to offer. That's SCHNABEL Studios.com. Check it out, see what we have, and bring your visions to life. You can head over to the Schnabel Studios YouTube page. That's youtube.com/@Schnabel Studios to find Mad Props, Sketching Up, or all their videos we have. In case you missed it, we just had Matt Hill of Ed, Edd n Eddy, one of my favorite podcasts I've done so far, just because I love Ed, Edd n Eddy. It was literally on my TV from 1999 all the way until I went to college. 15 years. It was always on my TV. So it was really exciting to talk to Matt. But he also talks about his running. He ran 11,000 miles across Canada and the United States. Talks about Ed, Edd n Eddy. Talks about meeting fans. A whole lot more. You don't want to miss it. That's on the Schnabel Studios YouTube page. Also, the Super Bowl is coming up, and we have something special coming out for the Super Bowl. We have a mic'd up video with Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott coming out. So you're going to want to subscribe to the Schnabel Studios YouTube page so you do not miss a mic'd up with Dak Prescott from the Dallas Cowboys. It's going to be a must watch. You can get all of that on youtube.com/@Schnabel Studios. You can also find Schnabel Studios on anywhere you get your social media. That's Twitter or /X, I guess. Facebook, TikTok, hopefully. YouTube, as we just mentioned, LinkedIn, all that stuff. Just search @Schnabel Studios on anything you get your social media, and you can find us there. All right, we're back here with producer Hannah. Now she wanted the title producer, and I keep giving you producer. I should just call you producer Hannah when you're on shoots too. People will be so
Yeah.
confused.
Yeah.
Like, she's producing this thing.
Uh-huh.
Like, no, I'm not.
Not
I'm
this
producer
one. No.
Hannah. But you're back on. You're back on the podcast to
Mhm.
help me out again. And we have Andy Smith. I did have a question for you, and I
Okay.
didn't ask this off air just because I want to know. Are you even a comic book person? Are you into comic books at all? Have you ever
No.
read a comic book in
I
your
have.
life?
I have. Okay, my sister and my dad really like comic books. I mean, I was thinking about that earlier. If you walk into my room, my sister's room, you can tell she likes comic books.
Hmm.
But no, I like
So which one have you read? You
um
like books of proper ones you might find on Audible,
true.
right?
Yes. No, I've read parts of Spawn. My sister really likes Spawn, and so I have read a couple of those, and then like Batman. Batman's my favorite superhero. So
So you, Matt, the other producer and the
Mhm.
co-host on Sketching Up, would get along really well because that's he's a fanatic of Batman. If you just
Right.
look at his background, he's crazy on Batman. So that's the first question I had. The second question I had is, do you enjoy the movies and stuff like that?
Yeah, I really do. I actually the reason I wanted to work in the film industry is because I like superhero movies so much. I mean, I watched growing up with my dad all of the Marvel movies, all of that good stuff, and then I thought the new Batman with Robert Pattinson was, I know that's not Marvel, it's CC, but one of the best things I've ever
No,
seen.
but you're saying superhero
So,
movies, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
You
So
you
big thing.
think this is just maybe you didn't even consider it. Have you seen the Christian Bale Batman movies, The Dark Knight, Dark Knight Rises?
Yes.
Do you think The Dark Knight is
Uh-huh.
better or worse than the Batman with Robert Pattinson? Because you just said it's one of the best ones you've ever seen. So I need
Yes.
to ask.
So I enjoyed the one with Robert Pattinson more. However, nothing can ever beat Heath Ledger's Joker.
Yeah,
So, and
carries the movie.
they're so different. Just like completely different movies. I feel like they can't be compared.
I'll have to I'll
I
have to let you borrow Batman Year One so you could
okay.
read the comic that went with the movie of the
Okay.
Robert Pattinson Batman, so you
Yeah.
can really immerse yourself in the lore of it
Mhm.
all. But
Yeah.
that's interesting that those are the movies that I guess in your generation that is kind of the big blockbusters that you would have
Mhm.
grown up with. Like those are I'm not this old, but those are the Jaws and the Back to the
Yeah.
Futures of your time. Back to the Future is personally probably my favorite movie of all time, between that and Jurassic Park.
Well,
But I
my dad
that
has his master's in film, and so like I grew up watching all the
mm,
classics, and so Back to the Future is one of his favorites too. And so I've
yeah,
seen those. I think there are three,
there's
um,
three.
but I've seen those.
Two is okay. Three is forgettable.
Yeah. Well, I was about to say I don't remember a single thing that happened in three. My favorite fun fact, though, is that they filmed the first two at least back to back, like
Yeah,
literally same shoot. So that's my favorite thing about it.
with one exception. Do you know what the one exception is?
I don't. The girlfriend, right? Was it the
Okay,
girl?
sorry. There's two exceptions
Okay,
then.
okay.
There's two exceptions because you're right. The girlfriend is different,
Yeah, like her hair
and
or something.
then
I can't even remember.
I believe the actress.
Is
No,
it the
or
actress? I
I
know.
think it's the I
Okay,
think it's just straight up the actress is different.
okay, and I think they put like a really bad wig on her or something. I
Yes,
think that's what I'm thinking of. Okay, what's the second one?
the dad
Uh-huh.
did not come back. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I could research it in a second.
Okay.
But he's not the dad in Back to the Future 2. That is just Michael J. Fox in makeup. And that's why when you see him in the
Oh,
future, he's upside down
okay.
because it gives a different perspective. So you don't even really
Yeah.
pay attention. But God, I wish I could remember his name right now. But he was like demanding more money and he got into a big
Uh-huh.
argument with all of them and he didn't come back. So they said, all right. So they made his character just Michael J.
Yeah.
Fox was his character, and they just did it that way. That's why he has like no lines. That's why he's upside down. That's why his
Yeah.
hair is covering his face. All that stuff because it's
Huh.
just Michael J. Fox in makeup.
Okay. I didn't know that. It's been a
Yeah,
long time since I've seen that one, though. Usually, if I'm watching it, it's just the first one on repeat.
I do. I mean, I love Back to the Future 1. I
Mhm.
do enjoy 2. I think it's very interesting. It gets a little convoluted because same thing with the MCU now. Time travel's tough.
Yeah.
And, then you find gaping holes and stuff like that. But at the same time, how do we know there's whole time travel doesn't exist? So like, we don't even know. We don't even know. But the third one was tough. That's one where they go to the Wild West
Okay.
and
Yes.
Doc is supposed to be killed and all this
Mhm.
other stuff and they have the gravestone and the picture of it. I just think that I don't know. I just didn't enjoy it as much. It's still,
Really?
I can watch it, but I did not enjoy it as much. But those are some of my favorite. But I do enjoy that you like the superhero movies.
Mhm.
Are you, so you like Batman, you like DC. Are you more of, I mean, the DC movies have kind of been tough, but are you more of that side of it? Do you really like the MCU? Do you like where the MCU is now? It's three separate questions for you right there.
Well, okay. I grew up watching the MCU more.
Okay.
Iron Man, all the Avengers movies. So love all of that. Batman is my favorite superhero, just in
Okay.
general. But
So have you
I
seen all
prefer,
those then?
yes, yeah, I've seen
Okay.
all of those, and I prefer Marvel to DC just in comparison. Like I like Marvel and I like Batman. Um, where the Marvel universe is now, no. I cannot say I've watched a single Marvel movie that's come out in the past, like probably since
Spider-Man, No
yeah,
Way Home.
Spider-Man. When did the Black Widow movie come out? Because I watched that one.
That
But
Spider-Man No Way Home would
uh
be after that.
okay, then
After
probably since
that was Doctor Strange, Multiverse of
yeah.
Madness, and then the Marvels,
Okay, I didn't watch that either.
and I'm sure there's another one in there. I haven't. I'm a huge Marvel person, but and we'll talk about it more with Andy Smith coming
Mhm.
up. I just think that they're just pulling random hats out of random
Yeah.
rabbits out of hats trying to make more. Unfortunately, it gets to go too much in depth in that. But if you want to hear more about that, we do talk about it on Sketching Up. So you can listen to this, then head over there. It's on the same YouTube channel, youtube.com/at Schnabel Studios. But I just think they're trying to pull too many different characters out and think they're going to be as successful as Iron Man,
Yeah.
which Iron Man was not anything leading up to the movies. So
Right.
the Avengers were the same. They were not as big as people think. I what I tell people is because I started following Marvel when I was very young.
Mhm.
I told a quick story about how I would go to flea markets with my dad and get comics. I was following when I was very young. And the characters I remember, and this is how I know, and it's been confirmed. I mean, now I've talked to many comic book artists, and they're like, "Yeah, that's right. Those were the big ones." The characters I remember being the big ones were Mr. Fantastic, specifically with the
Okay.
Fantastic Four,
Uh-huh.
Wolverine,
Okay.
Spider Man, the Hulk, right,
Uh-huh.
and Doctor Doom was the villain
Okay. And see, I've
from
heard
the
of
X Men.
him only because of my sister. I
Yes,
like
because he hasn't been in the MCU. He's
yeah.
been in like the X-Men movies from
Mhm.
Fox and stuff like that, but he
Yeah.
hasn't been in the MCU.
Okay.
Like Thanos was a big villain, but Doctor Doom was the villain. I
Okay.
might be forgetting one person from Captain America was pretty big too, so I guess I'll say
Mhm.
Captain America. But like Thor, Iron Man,
Yeah.
everyone else in the Avengers were not big at all, and a lot of the characters they're bringing in now, like they're low A kind of tierish.
Uh-huh.
But that's I always tell people when we talk about it, like they say like, yeah, Iron Man's the best. Like he's always been great. I'm like, he's been great since 2008.
Yes.
Before that, he was almost canceled many times.
Okay.
And the craziest thing about Iron Man is he actually has a whole storyline that basically matches up with Robert Downey Jr.'s real life,
Oh gosh.
which also made him the perfect character for it. Like he's a very alcoholic, like
Okay.
suicidal,
Yeah.
like off the rails. That was actually in Iron Man. That was his character at
Okay.
one point because they didn't know what direction to go with. They needed to get some traction on the character.
Yeah.
So they were doing all this crazy stuff, and so it was awesome. And do you know who was supposed to play Iron Man?
No, who?
Tom Cruise.
I
Would not be the same movie.
I guess I can imagine it, but no, it wouldn't be the same at all.
Wouldn't be the same movie.
And I feel like as much as I like Tom Cruise, he doesn't have the same like when I look at RDJ and like he's so precious to me. I love him and
Yeah.
but Tom Cruise is like okay, he's a good actor and I like watching his movies, but I don't love him the way I do RDJ. So I don't know if that's because he's Iron Man. So I don't know, maybe that would be different if Tom Cruise had been Iron Man, but I just feel like
Should you
oh,
go back
definitely not the
if
same.
you like RDJ and you haven't seen him, go back and watch some of his older movies,
Yeah.
like Chaplin, and
Mhm.
he was in a lot of stuff in the '90s. He was one of his first ones was with Rodney Dangerfield, Back to School.
Okay,
I
I
don't know if
haven't
you've
seen
seen
that
that.
one. Uh-uh.
If you go, you don't have to watch the whole thing. Just go look up a photo of Robert Downey Jr. in Back to School. It does not look like the same person.
Okay.
Just so young, teeth were not fixed yet. Like face is
Uh-huh.
just all over. It's funny. It does not look like the same person. But I do love Robert Downey Jr. Speaking of all this Marvel, all these comic books, we have Andy Smith coming up on the podcast. So stay right there. Let's roll the credits. This is Mad Props. All right, welcome to the show, Andy. Great to have you. We're really excited to have you. I'm a huge comic book nerd myself, so I love when I'm able to get comic book people on, just talking to pick your brain. We've had a couple of people like Scott Koblish has come on, and I just love picking your guys' brain and hearing what you guys have to say about comics, because it's just, I can read a million comics and they'll never be the same as what I think about comics. So it's great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. I love comics, have since I was a kid. Go to the shop every Wednesday, get disappointed when I don't get at least something, as long as it's at least one thing. It's gone down some. Before it was, 4 or 5 books a week, and I'd be disappointed if it wasn't that. Now it's like, okay, as long as I walk out with one book, I'll be happy. So
do you have a go-to, like, still to this day when you were a kid? Maybe both, maybe it's changed.
No, not really. I follow artists, but on a regular basis now, I like what Kirkman's doing with, Transformers.
Mm-hmm.
He relaunched G.I. Joe, twice, because there's the one that's with the Transformers universe and then the one that's not, and I get both those. So, I mean, on a regular basis, those are probably the only ones coming to mind, unless it's a limited series or something. But for monthly stuff, yeah, it's pretty much the Transformers and 2 G.I. Joes that he does. And then other than that, if art catches my eye or something, like I got Aquaman #1 last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was. So I'm a huge Aquaman guy, and I just had this thing about I like #1s. I read it. I did like it. I like the guy's artwork a lot, so I'll probably get #2.
Are you someone that's very, like, not critiquing, but like when you see something, you really dive deep into, like, not only the story but the art? Like, is that more what draws to you than the story itself, like the art or how it's structured or anything like that?
Yeah, 100%. In fact, I make the joke that comics are what, $3.99, $4.99 a piece, right?
Yeah, they've gotten up there.
Yeah, and my daughter, she goes with me. She buys Star Wars stuff from Marvel, big Star Wars fan. Anyhow, I'll watch her read a book, standard 22-page story comic, and 15 minutes maybe she's done. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, "You're done already?" She's like, "It's not that long." And that's where I differ. Being an artist, every book I pretty much buy, I look at with a critical eye. So while some people will be like, "Oh, comics are $4 or $5 now. Oh, then it takes me 10 minutes to read it, whatever." I'm like, yeah, for me, a regular $3.99, $4.99 book will take me at least a half hour, 45 minutes, because I really am slowing down and not just reading it, but once I basically read the page, I'll go back and look at the panel, and if it's an artist I like, I'll try and deconstruct it and see what they did and be like, "Oh, that's pretty cool. I could try incorporating, that technique or whatever." So
yeah, critiquing and learning at the same time, basically, right? Like, you're kind of learning their style, seeing maybe something that could fit to you as well, but also you're critiquing, like, "Oh, maybe I could have done this better, or this could have been this way and probably looked that way," or something like that. I'm the same way with everything that's collectible. I don't really have huge collections of anything. Like, my background would not look anything like your background, but I do have my fair share of comic books. But I'm very much also an art, especially cover art person.
Sure.
I will read the comic, and I'm a huge Spider-Man fan, because when I was younger, my dad would take me to the flea markets back when they were like, struggling for air at the time. So you could buy a box of comics for like 50 cents. Everyone was just trying to get rid of them. So when I was younger, I had basically the entire collection of the original Spider-Man. I still have some of them. Parents sold some of them over time. Some of them got lost over time. But I have like the original Sinister Six. I have like some really good ones that we got at this flea market. But
Sure.
I've grown more into, I love the story of Spider-Man, but I've grown more into really just loving the art, the cover art, the art within. And that's what really draws me in more than the comic itself. I think that comes with age too. When you're younger, more imaginative, right? You're not really looking as much at the images because you're imagining the things going
Right.
on, just like anything you would watch or whatever when you're younger. And as you get older, it's more of like you're really looking at the art and not as much of the story. And I do feel like that
Yeah.
kind of is why it gets that way with people when they get older with comics and stuff like that. Do you feel that way as well?
No, I mean, like I said, since I've been ever since I was a kid and wanting to do this for a living, the first thing that attracted me to comics was once again the art. So I've always just kind of poured over it and stuff. That's
Yeah.
one thing that really hasn't changed. And it, and I like a wide range of styles. I mean, I like Alex Ross a lot, who is obviously very, realism with his painted work. But then I like really cartoony stuff as well. I grew up before I knew about comic books. It was comic strips in the newspaper, and my dad would sit at one end of the kitchen table and he would toss me the comic strip section of the newspaper while he looked at everything else. So I have a really strong affinity for good comic strip art too. And same thing, I would always be really focused on the art more than the writing. I mean, now I do, when I'm reading, a comic, besides kind of dissecting the art, I am looking at, the writing structure and stuff. And like you said, I think I do go over it and do think like, oh, I would have definitely done this or this, in regards to like a visual panel layout. There were instances. Overall, I thought Aquaman #1 was good, but there were instances in it where I think the artist dropped the ball in giving a page a specific punch to it with, the way he positioned the camera or drew a shot. I think he could have done it more dramatically and stuff on a few pages. Because the thing is, it's comics. It's a visual medium. When I tackle drawing a script, I always think of how can I make this page visually interesting and, obviously at the same time, tell the story properly as well, you know.
So you started with Marvel and DC in the 90s, but it sounds like you had a lot of comics were in your life forever. So how did you get from the point of loving comics to getting to Marvel and DC? Where were you before you got into those major companies?
Oh, I mean, I was lucky. I always say that because I went to a place called the Joe Kubert School of Cartoon and Graphic Art. It's in upstate Jersey. I went in 1988, so I took a year off after high school, went from 88 to 91, which, it's a 3-year school. And, I got my first gig working for DC when I was in my senior year. So I always say I did. I lucked out because it wasn't that way for everybody. And it's not like, the school's not big. I mean, I think we graduated in my class, 35, 40 students. But I mean, honestly, out of the 35, 40 students, other people, not everybody that went to that school wanted to, draw comic books for a living because it was a school. I mean, Joe Kubert, legend in comics. So you'd think that's why people would go there. But they did focus on other things, illustration, so on and so forth. So other people graduated with jobs, but I think graduating with a job, actually penciling, which is, what I want to do is draw comics. There might have been 2 of us, maybe 3. And then other guys, while they wanted to do that, I know one guy, and I still work with him today. He went to that school wanting to be a cartoonist, and he had a great sense of humor, and his cartooning was really good. But he broke into the comic book industry as a letterer, and that's back, it was all hand lettered still. And that is what he still does to this day. He's been making a living as a letterer. And like I said, on all my creator owned stuff, that's who I use. So
So Now, this is someone that likes comics but doesn't know the in-depth of comics. Is that kind of how somebody gets into lettering? Is there people like already like, I want to be a letterer for a comic, or does it like you want a job, so you're just going to take whatever you get and then you get into it and you kind of enjoy it?
Yeah, well, I mean, for the Kubert School, the philosophy was that Joe taught was he wanted to teach us how to do everything. So not just penciling, but how to ink, how to color, how to letter. Even, and this is obviously once again during late 80s, early 90s, no computer stuff, even paste up and mechanicals. We had a class in that. So he wanted basically, it was twofold. For him, it was to be able to say, I'm making this number up, but we have an 80% employment rate upon graduation. So if somebody got a job doing paste up and mechanicals, even if they went to school going, I want to be a comic book artist, it doesn't, I mean, that the guy's working, it's better than flipping burgers. And then for the school, they get to go, check, he got a job in the industry, in an art industry doing what we taught. So, before the school, I would say, I don't know many letterers, and when I say that, I know more than I thought I would thinking of it, but I'm going back to the ones that were lettering comics, when I was a kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did they get in going, I want to be a letterer for the rest of my life? I have no idea. I've never really asked them, but there's a guy like John Workman who's just one of the best. Does everything Walt Simonson does. I believe he's an artist as well, and I mean lettering's an art form anyhow, so not to degrade it in any way, but it could be something that he was like, well, I'd rather do this, but they offered me a job to letter, let me do that. And he might, kind of like my friend Steve, just been like, this is really fun, and he's making a living at it, so just continue that path. One of the guys I went to school with, a colorist named Matt Hollingsworth, who I believe he's won an Eisner. He didn't go to school to be a colorist. He wanted to, I don't know if he wanted to draw, but I know he was looking at trying to ink, because I believe we collaborated in our senior year, because he was in my class, on a couple projects where I drew it and he inked it, and we would try and go, hey, I'm the penciler, he would ink it, and I don't know how he got into, coloring, but he got into coloring, and he's become, one of the most sought after and best colorists out there. So you kind of just, sometimes what you think you want to do, and, as a career in a specific business like this, you realize, you took this other path because you wanted a job and this is what they were offering. And maybe at first he was like, coloring, I don't really want to do it. But then he got into it and it was like, this is really fun,
Yeah. It's from other people we've had on, it's been told it's a very tough profession to get into. So you just jump into whatever you can, and you never know what you're going to like. I try to tell people all the time in my profession, that interns or whatever I have, like, try out everything, because you never know what's actually going to stick. Like, I do creative video and podcasting. That's not what I started as. I started as journalism, and then I did TV, and I didn't like either of them. And then I finally found my niche because I just kept going around and figuring out what I liked. And now here we are, and I love what I do, and I really enjoy what I do. So you got to try a little bit of everything to really find what you want.
And I think that when you're learning as well, if I had advice for somebody going to art school, whether it be the Kubert School or just any art school in general, I went into that school thinking I want to draw comics. I want to be a penciler. I want to draw comics. And we had a class in painting, because at that time they were starting to do painted covers and things like that. And once again, this is all traditional stuff, no Photoshop and whatnot. And there were some great painting teachers at the school that I had. And I basically blew the classes off. I did the assignments, of course, because I had to. I didn't want to fail. But I didn't focus as much as I should have and absorb what I could at the time because I was so singular, like had horse blinders on going, no, I just want a pencil. And now I look back on that and I go, God, I wish I would have paid more attention because, yeah, I mean, I can paint okay, but it's put it this way. I've never painted anything as like a job that I've been paid for. I basically will just play around with it for fun in my, whatever free time I might have. But I don't really put it on my website or show it because I just look at it and I'm obviously you're your own worst critic, but I'm just like, oh, no. And I do think back like, oh, I should have taken more advantage of it. So when you're in school for whatever it is, and I'm telling my daughter this, she's in college now. I'm like, it might not be something you want to do in your field because she's actually taking, she's going to get a bachelor's degree in digital cinematography. And there's been a few classes she's had to take. She's like, ugh. And I'm just like, I basically give her that analogy I just told you about the painting. I'm like, pay attention, take advantage of it, because you never know. A few years from now, you might go, oh, I should have paid attention harder.
Yeah. Swiss Army knife. That's what I try to tell people. Be a Swiss Army knife in your field. Well, if you could do a little bit of everything, you're going to be more valuable wherever you go.
And that goes back to Joe's philosophy at the school is when we graduated, the portfolio, because we had to show a portfolio to graduate, right? Now, I don't personally know anybody. I went there for 3 years. So, I knew people, and when I was a freshman, I knew people in the third year and second year, and then when I was in second, so on and so forth. I can't think of one person that didn't graduate because their portfolio wasn't up to snuff, right?
Yeah.
But Joe's philosophy was in the portfolio for graduation, he wants to see a little bit of everything. He wants to see lettering. He wants to see, pencils, inks, colors, illustration, like paintings and stuff. But when you're going to a company, and this was Joe's philosophy, when you go up to like Marvel and DC and meet with an editor, have a little bit of everything in your portfolio because they might look at it and go, I get it. You want a pencil, you want an ink, but you're not quite there. But these coloring samples are really nice. This lettering is really nice. Let's start you there. And who knows? Maybe that's what Matt did, Matt Hollingsworth, right? And that's how he got into coloring. I'm not exactly sure. But I totally didn't do that. When I went up to DC in my senior year, I took a portfolio that just had penciling samples in it, and that was it because I didn't want to do anything else. Now, if I would have graduated and not had a job in comics and was still going up, showing my portfolio, I probably would have changed the mindset to scattershot it like the Swiss Army knife, right? Because now I want to get a job. But I'm talking, I graduated in May. I took my first trip up to DC to show my portfolio in March. So 2 months before I graduated, and I got a job a couple weeks later near, say, the end of March. So, it worked out. But
yeah, at the time, you're like, why put it together? I'm already with DC. I'm with one of the big two. Why would I put it together?
And that's the thing. I still showed a portfolio to graduate to Joe and whoever the other instructors were that were looking at it of everything they wanted. But yeah, when I was going to try to get a job, it was no, I'm just showing pencils. I don't want to ink. Well, one, my lettering sucked. I would never have gotten a job as a letterer. I mean, that's the other advice. You've got to be honest about your skill set and what you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, Joe, I get it. And I love Joe Kubert. He passed away, unfortunately, 12 years ago now. But he was a great mentor, great man, great artist. But at the same time, I'm not going to put lettering samples in a portfolio when I know they suck.
Yeah, you're not gonna take away from yourself if you know it's not gonna be great. It's like, yeah, let me show you this awful thing I did.
Right. I mean, my painting stuff, I had to have it to graduate, but I knew I wasn't going to get a job doing cover painting, so it's like, take those out of there. Yeah. So that's just it. You got to be. I mean, I wouldn't look if when I went up to DC, it wasn't just me going, I'm going to go knock on DC's door in New York City and just show up. I was lucky. One of my instructors, Bart Sears, was teaching at the school at the time. We became friends, and he actually asked me, he's like, look, I had to go up there and dropped some work off because he was working for DC at the time. And he just said, he goes, you want to tag along and I'll introduce you to some editors. Now, I remember that, but I don't think I remember thinking to myself, oh, obviously he thinks I'm ready. But at the same time, I was actually talking to him yesterday about this for something. And yeah, I mean, obviously that was his way of basically saying, yeah, I think you're ready. Because if you weren't, there's no way I would invite you up. Because now he's putting it's not like he didn't walk in any office and go, hey, editor so-and-so, this is my buddy, give him a job. He walked in, he was like, hey, do you have a few minutes to look over Andy's work? He's a graduating, student. And he left. And then I got critiqued and stuff. But, once again, looking back on it, that was obviously, he thought I was ready. Or he, once again, would never have taken me up there.
He wouldn't put your name online, but also if he doesn't think you're ready and brings you up, it can affect you later when you try to go back. You're like, oh, yeah, that's the guy that came in with the awful work. Like, wow, we want him. It doesn't matter how long.
Well, not only that, but then behind my back, the next time he's talking to editors that he introduced me to, they could be like, dude, that was so uncomfortable. What were you doing? You know what his stuff looked like. Why would you put me in that spot? Yeah. And luckily,
it just put you in a bad situation, but it didn't.
Right. No.
You got put in a great situation, and you got a job with DC. So
it worked
I want
out.
to dive. I want to just dive a little bit more into that, just to understand that world, at least at that time more. So you get in with DC, you get the job with DC. So when does Marvel come in? Because you also worked with Marvel around the same time. I believe the same year, right? 91. You got both of those jobs.
I think I either started at Marvel in late 91 or early 92.
So around the same time, though.
Yeah.
Same time period. Yeah. So how does Marvel now come into the picture? Do you do the same thing and bring stuff to them, or now you're in the field, so they see your work and now they want you to go over there?
Well, I mean, yes and no. At DC, at least, when you're doing stuff, the stuff would get not necessarily shown around. I mean, maybe they did. I never really asked, but maybe an editor took it and showed it around. Basically, after I got my first job done at DC, I was living in Maryland. I grew up in Maryland. So after I graduated, I moved back to Maryland and with my parents because, just because you got one job doesn't mean you're the first job is hard to get. The second job can be harder. Put it that way. So I moved back in with my parents. But when I was finishing that first job, and it was just a regular, 22-page story, 32 pages in print, but without ads, 22-page story. I was sending pages up probably every time I did 5 pages, I would FedEx them up. That's how you did it when you lived out of state. But I know for the last batch of pages, I actually called the editor and said, hey, I'd like to come up in person and deliver them. So, I could just say, thanks, see you in person, but also basically walk around the office and show the work around to try and get another job if he didn't have anything. And he was like, yeah, go ahead. So I drove up there, wasn't that far away, and that's what I did. And I walked around and was like, yeah, this is the stuff I just finished for so-and-so, just looking for another gig. And I picked up, another job from a different editor. And it was kind of a regular thing. It was a book called Justice League Quarterly. So like the title, it comes out quarterly. So it wasn't like monthly. But it was 12 pages because it was an anthology book, every 3 months. And I took that home, started working on that. Then that same editor offered me a Green Lantern Annual, which was like 52 pages long while I was doing that quarterly stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And while all this was going on, I felt confident enough, okay, I'm going to move out of my parents' house. A buddy of mine just moved to Florida, to Orlando, and I helped him basically. So I moved down there. I was like, oh my God, Orlando's fantastic. I don't, last time I was here, I was like 10 and we were going to Disney. Now I'm 21 and I'm like, this is great. And it's cheap, Yeah. So I told my parents I'm moving to Florida. And honestly, the cost of living was cheaper than, where I was at in Maryland. So moved to Florida. Long story short, ended up sharing a studio with 2 other professional artists that, one is a guy named John Beatty, who started in like 1980, And then another guy was his name is Jim Sanders, who started like whenever Todd McFarlane was drawing the Incredible Hulk in the late 80s.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
around when Jim started because he inked some of those.
Gotcha.
So point is, I'm sharing a studio with these guys now. John was working for DC and I was working for DC. So it's not like John could suggest me to his editor, but Jim was working for Marvel and he liked my stuff. And he was just talking to an editor on the phone one day and he was like, hey, I got this. I share a studio with this guy. Would you like to see his, would you check out his work? And the editor said, sure. So I think I faxed up some stuff. No email yet.
Yeah.
And I got a job at Marvel, basically. So that's how that worked out.
And
then
you were able to do those at the same time? The DC and the Marvel?
There was probably some overlap. I only did 4 issues of Justice League Quarterly. I know it ran, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. No, I did 5 issues. I know it ran longer than just 9 issues. I started with 5. I finished with 9. I'm pretty sure it ran longer than just 9 issues. So it was probably a case of I got this gig at Marvel and I just told DC I can't do the Justice League Quarterly anymore. Because it wasn't the monthly book. It wasn't Quasar, which was my first monthly book there. It was a Doctor Strange annual. And back then the annuals were thicker, but they did like a 22-page lead story and then smaller stories. So I had the lead story. So it was 22 pages. But while I was drawing that, I think it was the same editor. I think the Quasar conversation came up right around the time I was finishing it. And then it was like, well, this is a monthly book. There's no way I can do this and the other thing. So I just, quit that 12-page quarterly thing at DC to do the monthly book at Marvel.
Yeah, and so there wasn't too much overlap, but how do you get through doing overlap like that? Like, if it's come up again in different projects you've had, like, it's got to be tough, especially DC and Marvel, 2 different characters, 2 different styles that you're trying to do. How do you get through that? Do you just finish up one, go to the other, or do you kind of work on one day, work on the other?
It's basically what are the deadlines, and then you just have to prioritize. If there was any overlap at all, and I obviously I don't remember, it's been 34 years, I don't remember, but if there was any overlap, it might have been just like, here's the script for the Doctor Strange thing. Okay, I've got 5 pages left of this DC thing. And it probably worked out to where time-wise I was just able to finish the 5 before even though the Doctor Strange thing was sitting there, and I just told the editor, got to finish this prior commitment, which, if the editor was like, nope, you need to start it right now, this is the deadline, at that point, they expect you to be, basically a grown-up, and they're not going to micromanage and be like, are you working on it? Are you working on it? Calling you up. They just go, one, I don't even think I probably would have, I think it probably happened what I said, where I was like, look, I got 5 pages left. And he was like, just finish them and then start this. But let's say that wasn't the case. And I was like, well, I got 5 pages left. He probably would have just said, look, this is a 22-page book. You've got 4 weeks. I don't care about those 5 pages. Just turn this in on time. And then it's up to me. And that's where it's just like, okay, I just have to prioritize because I know how fast I am and how much work I can get done in a day. And it's just like, okay, I'm working at night, or I'll put extra time in on weekends, whatever, to get it done.
Are you excited to see a lot of this? Obviously the MCU is huge. DC's building up. They're becoming movies. They're becoming shows. Are you excited to see a lot of these things becoming entities outside of comics? Like seeing some of the stuff you've maybe worked on even?
Oh, God, I tell you, every time whenever they announce something, I always think, did I work on anything that was tied to that in any way? Because, obviously until I go see it in theaters, I won't know. And just because, like, we've all, obviously, I'm assuming you've seen the MCU movies and stuff, or some of them. And at the end of every movie, there's always, somewhere around the end, there's always the special thanks, and it rattles off a list of comic book creators that they pulled aspects or storylines from, whatever. I don't think Now, I know a lot. I've seen a lot of my friends' names up there, but I don't think just because your name's there, it means they automatically go, okay, if you want to come to the premiere, that's cool. We'll save you a ticket, or we'll save you 2 tickets, but you got to pay your own way. But unless you're like Jim Starlin and Thanos, then they'll probably pull you out. But if you're,
they might give you
a
little treatment.
right. But if you're just one of the names in the long list, I think that if you wanted to go to the premiere, you probably can, but you've got to get there on your own dime and pay, the perk is you get to go to the premiere. So, when they did Guardians of the Galaxy, I'm like, well, Quasar was a sci-fi type character, space guy, maybe, because I think back to like, what did I draw is there anything I could possibly have drawn that they could have pulled? And honestly, the only thing that really comes to mind recently that I was specifically like, I got to look at the end of this, was the Creature Commandos cartoon, because it was only 1 issue, but there was a mini series with the Frankenstein guy that had a bunch of the other characters in it that are in the cartoon. And I'm like, who knows? It was a mini series. Maybe James Gunn is pulling some stuff from the mini series, and specifically the 1 issue I worked on, and I'll see my name. Well, I did not. So they did not. I saw the writer's name, and I think the guy that did most of the miniseries, I think I saw his name, which means they might have pulled something from that miniseries. But someday,
But not the book you did.
not the one.
Hey,
someday.
The way they're
doing
going,
so much stuff.
Yeah, the way this is going, you never know. It's going to become an Amazon series or a spinoff of something else or something else. I enjoy a lot of the stuff that's going on that's coming to screen. Some stuff more than others. I think the MCU is getting to a point where they don't know what direction they're going in, but that's a whole other story, right? DC is exciting to see what James Gunn is bringing up. And I'm a big Invincible fan. That was one of my favorite comics my entire life.
Yeah.
So to see it come to the screen has been really exciting.
Oh, they nailed it.
They've nailed it so far the whole way down. The only thing they haven't nailed is the release of it. The 4-episode, 6 months,
oh my God.
4-episode.
How long has it been since the last one? Like 6 months or so? I mean, it's been longer than that, I think.
Yeah. Well, the creator, the channel runners calling it out, like The Boys and Invincible. Like they had so much traction, but they release 8 episodes and they wait 3 years or 2 years or something and release the next thing. And they're like, if you're only gonna release 8 episodes, you can't wait 2 years. You gotta either release more or get a little faster.
I think Amazon in general, because The Boys is Amazon too, right?
Yes.
And I think it's Amazon going into their streaming and with their shows that are series, not thinking ahead enough, basically not sitting, and I could be 100% wrong, I don't know, but from the release stuff we're talking about, I don't think at the beginning of it, they said, okay, obviously if this thing is ratings garbage, okay, we're done after 1 season. So there is nothing to think about. But what if it's a rating smash? Then I would think before anything gets released, they would go, okay, what if the first season of Invincible, it's 8 episodes, we put it out, drop the first 2, then it's weekly after that, 7 weeks, season finale, it's done. If this thing is a smash, we need to have season 2 drop within 8 months to standard pretty much is a year, but no longer.
I was going to say a year,
right?
At the most a year.
Right. And the only show that's coming to mind that I think they finally realized that was Reacher, because the first season of Reacher was great, but then it was a while. And then the second season last year at this time, fantastic. And the third season drops in a few weeks. And they realized, like, we got to keep, you're right. You can't sit on it. Well, okay. So here's a great example. Speaking of like just sequels, right? My daughter's like, she brought up, Marvel will release like that image of thumbnails of the titles of the movie with the release date below, right? So she brought up Shang-Chi 2 and something like 2026, I think she saw or something. And I told her flat out, just like a week ago, I told her flat out, I said, I will bet you money there's no Shang-Chi 2. It's stupid. You don't go between. You can't go 4 to 5 years for a sequel for a movie that was just mediocre in the first place.
That's what I was about to say. For a movie that wasn't successful, you can't then wait 5 years to come back to it. That's why a lot of the characters, too, that they've been announced over the last whatever amount of years, you have never seen again. Where's Harry Styles? He just disappeared off the face of the earth.
Right.
Because it wasn't big enough.
Yeah. Guardians of the Galaxy, James Gunn goes over to DC. Dave Bautista's not coming back anytime soon. A lot of those guys are pretty much done. So at this point, that's the thing. It's like, I think the original Marvel roadmap, let's say, and I think they did have, this is going back to what I was saying with thinking ahead. I think with Iron Man, when they went into it, I think they really kind of maybe did have a longer plan. Whereas, once again, what if Iron Man blows? Well, then they try something else because it was Marvel Studios. But I think it was like, what if it's a hit? Well, then we do that Nick Fury scene, and there were probably people going, but what if the movie tanks? That Nick Fury scene will mean nothing. So what? What if it does great? Then you've got the launch pad. What I don't think they realized was, or thought was, and not saying I could do it, is 10 years later, because everybody's aged so much. Because after Endgame, honestly, what they probably should have done after Endgame was take a few years and then just reboot, ground up, everything.
Same
New
opinion.
Actors, just
opinion.
Reboot.
We have a second podcast on this channel called Sketching Up, and I haven't said it on this podcast, but on that one, a bunch of times, my big thing that always gets pushed back is I thought the MC should just reset after the whole Thanos series, the Infinity War series. And the reason I say that is because it's comic books. That's what they do. They reset. You get a new storyline.
Especially after 10 freaking years. I mean, 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, most franchises do that. Batman, Christopher Nolan, 3 movies, boom, reset. Because most movies up until this point were trilogies. Lord of the Rings, Batman, even Batman way back when with, Michael Keaton, George Clooney, Val Kilmer. And, honestly, a part of that was also just the movies not getting better. I mean, they just went down. Yeah. Because the vision changed, The
vision changed, the visuals changed, and I think one of the big things for me that I think is that they're starting to pull off the bench now, right? Like you've used the A-list members of Marvel. Right. Now you're trying to pull, and I get argument like, no, this person's known. But to a regular person that knows Marvel, they don't know these new characters coming out. They don't know who these people are. They don't have any interest in going to see them. They'll go see a Spider-Man movie because you know who Spider-Man is.
See, the only pushback I'd have on that is they can do it because they proved it. One, honestly, with Iron Man out of the gate.
Iron Man, yeah.
Iron Man
was not.
Iron Man was he was like a B or C list. Robert Downey Jr. helped out. But then if you want to take it a step further, nobody knew who Guardians of the Galaxy was.
Yes.
But the one thing that Marvel did right in that first phase with all those movies was I think they did a good job of defining each movie going into it. So Guardians of the Galaxy was a sci-fi space heist comedy, action comedy. I mean, my wife liked it. My wife doesn't give a crap about comedy.
Same. My girlfriend loves Guardians of the Galaxy. My parents love Guardians of the Galaxy.
Right. Ant-Man, the first one, was a heist movie. My wife loved that one too because it had comedy to it. Winter Soldier, which I think out of all the Marvel movies that were single characters, so Avengers don't count.
Yeah.
I think Winter Soldier was the best one.
Yeah.
And it was a freaking spy thriller basically with a superhero on it. My wife liked that one. So I think you can do it, but you've got to attach. I was going to say big stars, but then once again, you look at Guardians of the Galaxy. Chris Pratt was coming off Parks and Rec as a chubby guy that had to work out and get in shape. And now look at him,
even Robert Downey Jr. was not, he was a name,
Robert
but
Downey
at the time he was not A-list,
No.
Oscar winner or anything. He was very much someone people stayed away from.
Yeah. At the time it was, they're going to take a chance on that dude. wasn't he just in jail for drug abuse and stuff? Right. So that was really the resurgence of his career. So, I mean, that's a great point. They did get a name actor on it. And even at that time, that name people knew. You shoot down the list of everybody in Guardians of the Galaxy, the 5 main cast, people are like, who?
The only people that are known are the people that they're in it, but their voices are in it, right? Vin Diesel and Bradley Cooper. Everyone knows who they are, but you don't even see them. You just hear them.
Right. So, but once again, now Marvel's just, they're trying Brave New World. I go into everything with no expectation because then you can't be let down.
Yep.
But, Brave New World's gone through what, four reshoots or something?
And a bunch of name changes. Yeah.
It was New World Order, which, good Lord, out of the gate, where we're at politically, and I'm not taking sides. I'm just saying where the world is at. And you're going to name a movie New World Order? Are you freaking, whose genius idea was that? Right. Whose idea was that?
World Order. That's a good idea.
Yeah. So Brave New World, okay, but, I don't know. It's a tough road for me with it because, and this is the total comic nerd in me, but Sam Wilson doesn't have any powers. Mm-hmm. I hope that they say, like, I already saw that the wings came from, like, basically Wakanda, right?
Yeah. They have to be vibranium now. Everything has to be for it to be that super metal.
But now my point is, we've already seen shots of him flying. He has a face mask. Makes sense because he's going that fast. I get it. It's like Iron Man. But I hope to God that they say something like whatever he's wearing enhances his strength. Because every time I see the trailer and he's doing stuff, I'm like, the dude's not that strong.
Yeah, that's now the comic thing, though, right? Like, they don't have superpowers yet. When they get punched by the Hulk, they get up 5 minutes later. Like,
yeah,
they don't have any superpowers. How'd that happen?
Yeah, look, he punches the shield, and the shield is a whole nother conundrum because it absorbs all the impact and disperses it. Well, if that's the case, you've probably heard it. If that's the case, it wouldn't ricochet. It would hit a tree and just drop, right?
It just drop, yeah.
Right, but it ricochets. Okay, but if I'm standing behind a truck or just take the shield, it doesn't matter. If the Hulk punches the shield, it might absorb the impact, but I'm not going to move at all. I find that hard to believe.
Or someone's not going to move. It absorbs him, puts it back. Why is he's not getting hit by his own weight? Like, what's
right? Why wouldn't it be?
Nothing's getting hit. Yeah, falling backwards. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well,
yeah. So,
Andy, it's been great having you. We really appreciate you being here.
You got it.
Well, I have to come back and just do movie, Marvel, DC.
Oh, definitely.
Because they're starting to get into
Oh, yeah,
that pretty
dude,
well
definitely.
But we don't want to take up too much of your time. Thank you so much for being here. We
Appreciate
really appreciate you coming on. Do you really quickly want to plug anything that you have coming up or anywhere people can find you?
Yeah, so, social media is pretty much at Andy Smith Art. YouTube is Andy Smith Cartoonist. Or comic book artist. I've got a YouTube page. I do videos and stuff on drawing, whatever. And then my current book is called Kordrath, The Awakening. It's a barbarian, Game of Thrones-y, high fantasy type book, and that's on Indiegogo. And it's still funding. We're going to close it in February because the book will be going to print. So if you back it now, you'll be getting it soon. So
you can find all that stuff in the links down below in the description as well. Andy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. You got it.
Thank you, Andy, so much for joining us. Thank you, Hannah, for producing. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Remember, you can get your 30-day free trial of Audible at audibletrial.com/Schnabel Studios. Go get that today. I use it legitimately all the time. It's one of my favorite products. I'm so glad they're on board with us because it's really great to learn or to fantasize, whatever you want to do. audibletrial.com/Schnabel Studios. Go get the Curiosity Box by Vsauce today, the-curiosity-box.pxf.io/Schnabel Studios. As you see, I have my Curiosity Box. If you go to Sketching Up, we opened the Curiosity Box on air. A lot of really fun stuff was in there. Go check that out. Get your own Curiosity Box today, the-curiosity-box.pxf.io/Schnabel Studios. Make sure you see Matt Hill on Mad Props, the last episode of Mad Props. Make sure you check out Sketching Up, episode 125, just released on the Schnabel Studios YouTube page. And again, Super Bowl week, we will have Dak Prescott mic'd up. So definitely go to youtube.com/@Schnabel Studios to catch everything that's going on over there. You can also find us on social media at Schnabel Studios on Facebook, Instagram, hopefully TikTok, Twitter/X, LinkedIn, and anywhere else you can get social media at Schnabel Studios, SCHNABEL Studios. You'll find everything you want to find. You can find this podcast at Mad Props Pod on Instagram and Facebook and even X, although not a lot is posted on there. So don't go follow that. But Instagram and Facebook, we definitely do post a lot on. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you for being here. We will see you next time. This has been Mad Props. See you later.